If you want to know what my book is about, I would say look at the title, The Necessity of Secularism. Sometimes it's said you can't tell a book by its cover, but at least in my case, you can tell what the book is about by its title. The book presents an extended argument in favor of the proposition that citizens in democracies need to embrace secularism. Before I explain why secularism is necessary, perhaps I should first describe what I mean by secularism, because there are some misconceptions about secularism. First of all, secularism is not the same thing as atheism. Many religious people accept secularism, probably not enough, but in any event, there's no contradiction between being religious and accepting secularism. In my conception, there are two components to secularism. One is the familiar principle of separation of church and state. So if that principle is followed, you have a secular government. But a secular government, although that's necessary for a secular society, is not sufficient. To have a truly secular society, we also have to make sure that religious precepts do not influence public policy, and discussions about public policy are carried out entirely in secular terms. Well then, if we want a democratic society, secularism is necessary, because a democratic society implies that the government will feel obliged to justify its policies to its citizens, and perhaps more importantly, the citizens themselves will discuss and debate public policy. Well, there's one indisputable, clear prerequisite for that democratic discourse to be successful. The participants in that discussion must be able to understand, evaluate, and debate the reasons that others offer for their viewpoints. And they can only do that if they're speaking a common language, which is the language of secularism. As soon as you introduce religious precepts into a public policy discussion, you're essentially shutting out of that discussion anyone who's not a follower of that particular religion. And in a religiously pluralistic society, that means you're shutting out of the discussion large numbers of people. As others have observed, religion operates as a conversation stopper. As soon as you evoke a religious doctrine that's based on faith, effectively that's the end of the conversation. Well, my thesis would be relevant, I think, in any era, but one reason I think the book and its claims are especially relevant now are the dramatic changes that have taken place in the religious composition of the population of many countries, especially developed countries, including the United States. For the first time in human history, in many countries, large segments of the population are now non-religious. In addition, even with respect to the religious segment of the population, again, in many countries, it's much more diverse than it was in the past. So if you want these different diverse groups of people to be able to talk to each other, to engage in a meaningful dialogue, to really discuss and debate public policy, they need to embrace secularism. One counter-argument against my thesis would rely on the fact that some public policies do have a moral dimension. And since some would claim that religion is indispensable for morality, if that were true, then you could not completely eliminate religion from public policy discussions. So to refute that claim, I have to show that in fact morality is not based on religion, and hence the subtitle of the book, Why God Can't Tell Us What to Do. I give many arguments in my book as to why God can't tell us what to do, why religion is not the foundation for morality. I'll just give one example here. So some people say, yes, morality is based on God's commands. Well, what commands? I mean, how do we know what are really God's directives? Because if you look at the various religions, they're all in disagreement about what God supposedly has revealed. So, the Jewish God and the Islamic God says you can't eat pork. The Christian God says that's okay. The Islamic God says Friday's a holy day. The Jewish God says Saturday. The Christian God says Sunday. The Catholic Christian God says contraception is a horrible moral evil. Most other religions don't think so. The Jewish God says you have to give up your foreskins, and most other religions say you can hang on to yours. So you have, the list of disagreements can go on and on and on. So when you say based on commands, what commands? And the bottom line is there's no rational way to resolve these disagreements. So we can't base morality on commands from God, in part because we don't know what God is saying. I think the conclusion is inescapable. If we want to live together in peace, we need to reason together. We can't have God tell us what to do. We need to figure that out for ourselves. And to do that, to engage in meaningful discussion with others, to respect others, we need to use a common language, and that is the language of secularism.